All right, we have net security, and we talked about securing items. You know, you can secure an application like a server, or a web server, or some type of device. You can secure those. You might have a certain data server. You can secure them, or you should secure them, with username and password. Okay? Now, what we were curious in the information on the midterm was what difference would that make if you secured them using a VLAN, which then would talk about securing them at a different layer in the OSI model. So if, for example, you used a VLAN, if you did not give anybody else access to the VLAN, then only those on the VLAN would be able to access, let's just say, some data server for a specific project, let's just say. Rather, if you secured only the data server, then you would say, well, they'd still have to get by the username and password, but we know both of those can give us human error. Somebody could accidentally give it out, somebody could write it down, somebody might be able to track that going through. But if the people were kept strictly on a VLAN, that would be another option, another layer to secure that. But what I was really looking for is the fact in a network, if you use network security, you can stop traffic. You can stop traffic at a particular layer, and none of the traffic even accesses the data, the server where the data is. Okay? That also allows for a real performance, a real performance upgrade. How much, it could vary depending on traffic and everything, but you don't have people on the network that don't need to be there because they're stopped here. And what we're going to talk about too here in a little bit is controlling access coming in to a network. Okay, so we looked at an example here of it. Just in general, you have your inside devices, and they're either accessing Wi-Fi, an access point, or they can be hardwired into a switch somewhere. And then we can have our servers, and here again is the example of a data server. We can have Active Directory, and we can use a user ID and a password in order to allow people in. Then in some cases you might have an entire different VLAN that allows web traffic to move through your switch, which in this case, if the internet was out here, that traffic could come in and go to the web servers or email or those services that need access from the outside. Then it would be, they'd have to have certain permission in order to get from there. Like if the web server needs to come in and get some data from a database and then brought back out to the web services for people who need access to it to come in and get it. So we're looking at those comparisons and what layers are you creating the security at, and what mobile layers you can do that at. The next gives us a look at, we talked about schools, and the students did some work in terms of a school network, and these are some things we're looking for. We had students, we had staff, and we had guests. Okay. Now we want to keep this traffic separate, but there may be times that a student needs to get to one area or another, or maybe a guest needs to get to one area or another. And so most people said, well, we're going to do this. We're just going to create VLANs, which makes a lot of sense. Okay. Now, my thinking would be you would have the different VLANs distributed within, okay, and you can have an access point and give wireless connections, and in that access point it can put the correct information on the correct VLAN. As the information comes in, put it on the right VLAN, trunk it up to the switch, and then in the switch we can control access in there. We can use access control list in a multi-layered switch and control where the traffic moves to. And you really need the separate VLANs. You really need the separate VLANs because this switch may have to service some students, a faculty, and maybe even a guest in the same location. Maybe a guest on a computer where everybody can use versus some student machines or a faculty computer, maybe all in the same room. Now, a lot of students, they used, instead of a multi-layered switch, they might have used a router, a switch, created a trunk, and then had their VLANs, and then managed the VLANs in the router, which would be fine also. There was some performance advantages here, having those devices together, but that's, we can talk more about that another time. No matter which scenario you do down here, you need to have some kind of firewall, and in the school environment they get E-rate, and the phone companies give a break for E-rate. They get a percentage off things like access to the internet. How much they pay for this bandwidth, how big a pipe. And nowadays, with more and more work being done out in the cloud, this needs to be a relatively a relatively good connection. And then I gave a little example of, in one school we had a multi-layered switch, and we were able to run a VLAN through there to allow a group to come in from the outside just on that VLAN and manage the HVAC, the heating, air conditioning, cooling, all those devices. They can manage it remotely. And then in a school scenario also, you have to figure how are the students going to access things. Are you going to have a login password, or just everybody's has access? How are you going to divide that up, and how are you going to manage that? And then how are you going to manage storage? Everywhere needs to think about this. How are you going to manage storage? The student does an assignment. Where does it sit? Do you come off here with a server to hold all the data? Do you tell the students they have to put it out in the cloud? Do you have an LMS system internally where the students can deposit information, data? Do they, Lord knows, we hope we don't put it on a flash drive or maybe store it locally. But these are things you got to know. You got to figure out how you're going to manage that. All right. And then the other day, we talked about where we're going in terms of projects. Now, currently we have a project that requires 2 switches. So we have connected, then we have these scenarios here, down here. And we have switches, okay? Justin's not in that group anymore. And so we have 2 switches. We have a multi-layered switch, and then there we can do our inter VLAN. We can do our inter VLAN routing inside that switch. Great thing to practice. Make sure we're doing that correctly. And then we work on our trunk, and then the big thing now that we're working on is security coming in. And if you can do it on a switch, you know, if we can do it on a layer 2 switch somewhere or another, then we'll do some practice. The same thing on an access point, you know, meant that to be a P, an access point. Okay, so you could come into an access point, you know, wirelessly, and do security, and then that can be trunked. Okay, that can be trunked then up to, let's say, the multi-layered switch. So each group of two have a layer 2 switch, a multi-layered switch, and they have this connected to a router. Okay, so here are the routers. I will circle. This is a multi-layered switch. This is a multi-layered switch. This one, and this one. All these two are the same. This one I believe a little newer, and these two might be a little bit older. They are a little bit older. Then we have our layer 2 switches right here, and then we have our routers right here with these device numbers. And these routers all would allow us to do zone-based, and this one we could do CBAC on. So we have a router, and then the students were all assigned a certain part of an IP. So we have this IP, and so going out, this .1 here, they can use their appropriate address in there, and it's a 172.20, and then in class I gave them the ports on this device. Okay, now we're going to use this setup all the way through next week, and possibly a little bit into the week following that. So next week we're going to finish up all of the LAN security, chapter 6, and we're going to go into chapter 7, which there are no specific labs, but we talk about cryptography. We talk about encryption, decryption, hashing, you know, keys. We get a good review of some items, and maybe a few more specifics than what was covered in IDA. All right. I'll give a little bit of a report now. This was the other day of a report on chapter 6, and there we're talking about endpoint security. So we're talking about, you know, how you secure things on the edge. Now we talk a lot about edges. So you have an edge really internally, in which you have all your users with all their devices that need access in the network. And then you have all kinds of resources in the network. CES, did I get that right? And then we also have an edge out here, an untrusted edge with the internet. Okay, or you can have an edge with a vendor, or an edge with some customers. You can have a lot of different ways in which people come into your network. Okay, come into your network and use things like, you know, have access to data, you know, apps. We could go on and on, all kinds of servers and so forth. So here's what we're concerned about: is this access in, and there are ways to manage the access right here coming in to the devices, whether you're coming in a wired solution or you're coming in wirelessly. And we're mostly just concerned today about Wi-Fi. So one thing people can do, Cisco product, Iron Port, in general, you can get a device to put inside your network. Somewhere's in here, coming in, okay? Coming in, go through this device like right before it hits your firewall or whatever, and it's going to manage email, sorting out spams. It can look at spyware. You can have all kinds of policies of what to do with that traffic before it ever gets inside your network. Okay? Some people choose to move their email and some of those services out to another service so they can do most of that work. I think I mentioned here at the college I saw some old data a couple years ago, but they were sorting out 90,000 spam emails every month out of the emails coming into the college. And you got to think, those emails are using some of our bandwidth because they're getting all the way to our device. All right. Network access control, we looked that up in class. The students did a nice job of finding out some things. Cisco calls it network admission control, but that's where here we can do a variety of things. We can, first of all, you can authenticate or authorize somebody. Okay, you can, if we talk about A, we can authenticate, authorize, and then audit, keep track. Okay, so these two you can do. You could have a Radius server in here, and somebody could come in with a device or a wireless device, and they'd have to authenticate on the server before you'd open up access in. It's a great philosophy. Don't let them even in the network if they don't belong there, if they can't authenticate. Now, we talked about all the issues that might have, bring your own devices, how you manage that. Another thing you can do here, again, it's talking about network access control. You can, there's a variety of ways, you can check to see if this device is okay to have on your network. All kinds of things you can check. You can check virus, you can check software updates, etc., etc. The device can have an agent on it, and then that agent would help here check that. Or you can just scan the device and look through it yourself using software from here. I believe it's 802.1x. There's protocols that help us do that. That's an X, by the way, if you're wondering. All right. So it's managing the access in. Let's keep moving. Cisco Security, other software can do the same thing. Cisco Security Agent, I will read from you. Cisco Security Agent is a host-based application, so it's out here on your host. It's a host-based application that can intercept operating system calls, working right with the OS, and compares them with the cache security policy. So if a request does not violate the policy, it's passed on to the kernel for execution. If the request violates the policy, it's blocked. And there's a couple actions you can take. You can send an error message, you can generate a message to some management center, and so forth. Other things we're going to have to finish up with next week. We have to talk about, the curriculum does a nice job of talking about all the different types of attacks. We can discuss any of those are confusing. We'll actually configure port security, all those things with port security. We've done a little of that in the past. We can span, we can take a port on our switch, and we can take, let's say we're going to follow this traffic. I'm up here in the middle, where you can take that traffic, and that traffic can be duplicated and out here to maybe you're running Wireshark or something to watch that traffic. So you can take any ports from any area, from anywhere, and duplicate that traffic so you can monitor it. And that's easy to set up, and we'll do that. And we'll talk a little bit about the security, voice over IP, storage, area networks, and then wireless. Obviously, wireless has a lot to do with security. Well, that was a little long, but it's a good review of everything that happened this past week.